North Carolina is a state known for its rich history and Southern charm. It has within its boundaries nationally ranked universities, innovative businesses, renowned research facilities, a booming economy, and a tradition of farming that has made it a world leader in agriculture. But behind its picturesque landscapes lies a heartbreaking reality that often goes unnoticed. In this 30-minute documentary, we delve into the issue of childhood food insecurity that plagues communities across the state. Childhood should be a time filled with laughter, exploration, and boundless possibilities. Yet, for thousands of children in North Carolina, hunger casts a dark shadow over their lives. According to recent studies, 1 in 6 children, almost 400,000, close to the population of Raleigh, are food insecure. But just what does it mean to be food insecure?
Food insecurity is going for an extended period of time with little or no access to food in the household or in the environment in which a child resides.
Food insecurity is a lack of access to consistent food for every person in your household needed to have a healthy and thriving life. And food insecurity can be something that's temporary, but it's a way that we use, it's a measure that we use to figure out if people are struggling to afford food.
The important thing, I think, is that food insecurity is really a spectrum that encompasses hunger. So in its most extreme form, food insecurity might be that people don't have enough food to eat and thus experience the physiologic sensation of hunger. But other ways that food insecurity can affect people's behaviors or health or things like that are things like worrying about whether they have enough food to eat or making decisions in order to make sure there's enough food on the table. So there's this whole spectrum of food insecurity, of which hunger is one aspect.
In our food pantry over the last year, we have seen increase in clients. During the pandemic, it was interesting. Our numbers actually dipped because of a lot of the assistance that was being given out, that families were actually able to afford their groceries. But since that assistance has been ending over the past year, our numbers have been steadily increasing.
We have seen an increase in people using the food pantry. We've probably, in the last 3 months even, doubled the amount of families that are coming through. And 20% of those families are new. There are more people coming in who don't have jobs. There are more people coming in who are elderly and it's not going to get better for them. And so we're seeing some of the regulars increase. And then the new families that are coming in, honestly, the food pantry that we service, the community that we service, 68% of the families that are coming through right now are Hispanic. And so they're coming in and they're not finding work as quickly, and so they're leveraging our resources in the meantime.
We see individuals from all walks of life coming through our doors. Some individuals are coming through for the very first time. At our mobile markets, it won't be uncommon to see a couple coming through and they're driving a Mercedes, or a couple coming through, and they're driving the latest Tesla that came out. These are individuals that were able to afford this at whatever point in their lives, and they acquired this. But they can't sell that car now. They can't just park that car, and so you can't pay a certain percentage of your rent. You can't pay a percentage of your light bill, those things, but the one thing you can cut that most families do is food.
2023 was not kind to families living in poverty in North Carolina. Global supply chain problems contributed to rising food costs. Supplemental nutrition assistance payments to low-income families were reduced to pre-COVID levels. Families living on the edge of financial difficulties often fell hard.
I used to budget, say, like $300 a month for groceries, but now with inflation, eggs, milk, bread, this basic essentials, that's $100 easy for like 1 week worth of groceries. So now my $300 budget, my income didn't increase when inflation increased. So that's really putting a strain on the household.
We might be the ones who are on the donating side of the food shelves, but at any point in time, we could be on the shopping side.
For my household, everything drastically changed in the matter of 24 hours. My sister became ill and moved from New York City at the beginning, in the height of COVID, to my home. And then I had my other sister who was coming to help assist to take care of that. And then my husband got injured at his job, and that put him out of commission probably for about a good 3 or 4 months. So in a matter of days, I literally was just so confused about how was I going to handle this, what am I going to do?
The number one thing to go if you're trying to choose between keep a roof over my head or keep the lights on or have water is food. And moms and grandparents and dads were having to choose between, do I put breakfast on the table or do I pay my light bill?
The hardest part of my job is still trying to convince people that hunger exists. How can we live in the richest country in the world? And to bring it even closer home, how can we live in a state that has one of the highest level outputs of fresh produce, and yet still 1 in 5 children go hungry?
Likely that a number of those children live in urban areas. They may not have the opportunity to access local products.
People often think that food insecurity and poverty are a problem that just is in our urban areas in North Carolina. But the reality is, in rural North Carolina, we have areas where it's an hour to a full-service grocery store. And if you don't have access to a car, even if you have the money to buy food, how do you get there? How do you actually make those purchases?
When you see who actually experiences food insecurity, it's largely children under the age of 18 who we don't expect to work because they should be going to school. It's adults over the age of 65 who are retired and we don't expect to work. It's people with disabilities who we don't expect to work because of their disabilities. So the actual slice of people that we think of as being able to work but just choosing not to is very small when you look at the data. Well under 5% of the people who experience food insecurity. And often those cases are people who actually have disabilities, but because of their disability haven't been able to complete the paperwork or get sort of formally considered to be disabled.
I think it really stems from great economic disparity in our state. We have a lot of people who are thriving. We have some wonderful growing metropolises, and we have a lot of families that are struggling just to get by. And when we have families who are fighting tooth and nail and literally deciding, do we put gas in the car? Do we get dinner tonight? Our children are the most vulnerable to suffer in that situation. And that's what that statistics show and certainly what I've seen in my own experience.
The bottom line is that work does not reward as well as it needs to. We have families in North Carolina that are working very hard, 2 and 3 jobs. They cannot afford health insurance, they cannot afford transportation costs, and they cannot afford food at a time when everybody is talking about the price of eggs and the price of milk. The cost to just get by and to feed your family is higher than ever.
Food is always on the chopping block for individuals and families that are in tough decisions and have to make tough decisions. And they make these decisions, and especially families with children. It's real easy for a parent to say, I'm gonna let my child eat and I'm not gonna eat. But it's very hard to say, I gotta pay rent this month and nobody can eat.
So many children go hungry, they suffer from food insecurity, but we're just simply not aware of it. And so the fact that we don't know something exists doesn't mean that it doesn't.
Children need access to healthy meals 3 times a day, just like the rest of us. And food insecurity is when they don't have that reliable access to food that is both healthy and affordable.
I see hungry children every day, and it breaks my heart. A snack just doesn't do it. Where as an adult, we can eat 3 meals a day and get by, children need nutrition throughout the day.
It is difficult for a hungry child to learn because children need to nourish not only their bodies, but their minds and their spirits. Children's bodies need to be well nourished from the nutrients they derive from a high quality meal. Their brains as well are in a developmental stage, so the nutrients provided in the food they consume at school help to contribute to their brain growth and development and their attention in the classroom.
Our brains are wired to do one thing, to keep us alive. And so if we're hungry or we're in danger, your brain is going to figure out a way to get you to that. How do I make this body survive? That's what your brain wants to do. That's neuroscience. How can a kid sit there and learn algebra when they're hungry? Your brain isn't gonna let you do that. Your brain is thinking, hello, feed me. You can't be successful in class.
When I'm hungry, it's hard to not think about anything else because my stomach's just aching and my head hurts.
Some things that are more difficult to do when I'm hungry is focusing in a classroom while I'm doing work, like reading a book.
When I'm hungry, I'm moody. Sometimes I can get angry.
It's basically my mind starts focusing on my stomach more than my actual work.
And in high school, what I see is it makes students sometimes lethargic in class. They're sleeping and you have to wake them up. But other times it makes them angry. They're hungry. They're in a bad mood. They cannot focus in class. And then the rest of the class can be impacted by it. And the teacher is trying to help. But your brain is not wired to be okay when you're hungry.
One marker that we use for nutrition is iron status, and this is iron that goes into making our red blood cells. We know that one potential outcome of not having adequate nutrition is iron deficiency, and we know that iron deficiency is associated with lower IQ scores.
I don't think until you see it up close and real, like I see it up close and real, do you truly understand and know what it means when a child is so hungry that they can't focus. And many times those that hunger manifests itself in behaviors that would be seen as being disruptive or just ill-behaved.
When there's a lack of students being able to eat meals at all, just physiologically, it hurts the student's body. And with us being a middle school, you have students that don't understand the changes that are going on with their body. And as they don't understand the changes that are going on with their body, they react in certain ways. So we see a lot of social emotional issues that come about where there's a physiological need that's not being met.
I see a lot of people coming in right now, and it's like, why are you acting out? Why are you being kind of hateful? Why are you not fitting in? Why are you trying to, go against, the school rules or whatever? And it could be simply that these kids are hungry and they don't know how to tell you that. So they want to act out in other ways, but they don't want you to know that I didn't get breakfast this morning, and I might not get dinner tonight.
I'd challenge you to think about how you feel when you're approaching lunch hour at work and your stomach starts to grumble, and how can you focus in a meeting or on your work when the only thing you can think about is, okay, I'm ready for lunch because my stomach is grumbling.
Not having enough to eat can really negatively impact students. It can have a negative impact on their ability to concentrate, on their ability to focus, and that could negatively impact their academic performance. If they're not able to pay attention in class or to absorb what they're learning, we've seen things like lower test scores, poorer grades. So it's really important that students have enough to eat in order to perform successfully in their schoolwork.
Every day I see students whose heads are laid down on their desk. I see students who have low energy, and as a person who grew up hungry at school, I can easily identify who those kids are most of the time, but sometimes we don't know who they are.
They may not have had breakfast and now they're coming into lunch and they're hungry. It may be that they haven't eaten since school lunch yesterday or school breakfast yesterday. So the hunger would be overwhelming.
Kids walk into the classroom every day with an invisible backpack of issues. They're dealing with trauma issues at home, family experiences that are plaguing them. We talk and think a lot about dental issues and kids suffering with aching teeth and how do they focus in the classroom. But then on top of all of that, to add hunger, it is really hard for kids to succeed in that environment.
When I'm hungry, I look for staple foods like rice and stuff.
if I can find that at the house. If I don't have that, I basically look for whatever I can.
When we think about a hungry child and learning, this has everything to do with science. And so what we do know is that a brain that's properly hydrated, a body that has proper nutrition and has the energy that it needs, it allows the brain to process at a much faster rate, a much more efficient rate. And so if we think about the connection of nutrition and learning, I mean, the two go hand in hand.
And certainly, let's not forget about nourishing their soul, because just receiving the meal that they receive at school with the community of other students is almost nourishing in and of itself. They come together as a small community. They learn to be friends together. They learn to support one another, and it all centers around the meal they have together.
Eating with other people is something that a lot of our students might not necessarily have at home if their parents have a different work schedule, so they might not be exposed to sitting down and sharing a meal, because learning how to communicate and sit down and enjoy each other's company is part of the school experience as well, and taking that and putting it in a social setting such as sharing a meal is something that kids, they crave and they thrive when they learn how to develop that skill set.
60% of North Carolina's 1.5 million public school children qualify for subsidized meals. Many are embarrassed. They cannot afford to buy their meals. Walking to the school lunchroom should not be a walk of shame.
Being on free lunch was not something that I really noted when I was in elementary school or perhaps even middle school, but in high school it becomes a different thing. It's a time when kids are, hypersensitive to differences. And differences of resources and money and whether your family has money was something that mattered. To me, the stigma of being on free lunch said something. And so there were, a lot of times where that felt shameful.
I was in 9th grade, and I remember being terrified that people would know that I was poor. When you're a teenager, you have so many insecurities, and you don't want people to know the truth about you and your family. There's shame in being poor, and I'm not saying that's right, but I am saying it's real.
I'll be honest, I get jealous pretty easily because I do know that other people have opportunities that I don't. So when I see people that are like, oh, I was able to get this, and this, when I literally know that I'm struggling at home, it's like, that's great for you, but I just get envious, really, because I know I don't have that opportunity, really.
I see students every day in my classroom who feel shame because they can't afford the cool shoes. They can't afford to play a sport because it costs money to play a sport. Whose mom can't come to their games when they do play a sport because she can't afford to get in. We don't need our students to feel shame because they can't eat.
Having access to free meals should be a fundamental part of our public education system. We don't ask the family how much money they make before we decide if they can get a desk. We don't ask them how much money they make before we decide if they deserve a school building. We don't ask them to help pay an entrance fee as if they're going to a concert to make sure that the child gets to come into school. But we do that for school meals.
Universal free breakfast and lunch is less than $100 million. And at this time, in this year when this is being recorded, 2023, the state budget is $32 billion. We'll be debating a bill today that's about to give $500 million to private schools. So you wonder why we can make those choices and not make the choice for much less than that to feed every child in our state.
If we were to just pass a law in North Carolina saying we're going to pay for lunch and breakfast for all the school children every single day, the price tag on that is $148.8 million. And so that would be $105 million for free lunch and $44 million for free breakfast. So that's a lot. That is a hefty price tag. So the Senate is working toward helping those children who are hungry get the food they need at school through lunch and breakfast by paying the reduced lunch fee for those students, and then also expanding the community eligible provision so that in those areas where you have higher amounts of poverty, all the children would be able to get free meals at school.
CEP stands for Community Eligibility Participant. That means that we have enough students in our school that are going to qualify for free or reduced lunch, that instead of us looking at individual applicants, what we are able to do is grab that whole school as a whole. And then of course you can imagine that the CEP district, now it does collect those schools together and then give us that eligibility that way.
Being a CEP school means it's an opportunity for our kids to eat free breakfast and lunch every day, regardless of family income, regardless of filling out an application for free and reduced lunch like most districts have to do. So it's one less thing for kids here at school to have to worry about the instability of where their next meal comes from during the hours that they're at school. So they know, regardless of whether or not someone filled out that paperwork or it got processed the way it was supposed to be, that they're going to get a breakfast meal every morning during first period. They're going to get lunch and a choice of a full lunch every day. And that's important for kids to not have to worry about, because we want them focused on school, not about whether or not they get a meal.
I don't want to be the principal that has to tell a parent that a child can't eat because of a bill in the cafeteria. And that's something that I'd probably be faced with if I wasn't a CEP school. So because of being a CEP school, our students, they come in, they eat breakfast at no charge, they eat lunch at no charge, and there's no paperwork, no hands are tied at all when it comes to being able to get these meals to our students.
It's still kind of hard for me to believe that in today's society, with a society that's so plentiful, that there are kids who don't get enough food.
One of my classmates from high school is a teacher in Swain County, and she has told me about how she keeps peanut butter and bread in her classroom because when the kids come back from the weekend, they haven't had enough to eat, even with programs like Backpack Buddy programs. And so they need to get enough food in them to start functioning immediately.
We're trying to really increase the reach of our benefit programs like SNAP and WIC because we know they work. There is a significant body of evidence to show that they improve kids' health outcomes, reduce hunger, improve their academic and even longer-term outcomes. So we're really trying to make sure that every eligible family knows knows that they're eligible for these type of programs, and that we can make it easier for them to apply and to stay on those programs as long as they need. A second area that we're really focused on is really trying to build connections between the healthcare system and food. We know that as people see their primary care doctor, that is a really incredible way for them to get connected and screened for hunger and food insecurity, and that healthcare provider can be a really great connector to food resources.
Some clinics have taken the first step of having on-site food pantries. Other healthcare systems have really thought about not only screening and tracking, but having interventions to address social determinants of health that are disclosed, such as food insecurity, in terms of providing information about local food banks or pantries.
You know, when we talk about School Meals for All, we're talking about a really accountable program. The audits that are done on school meal programs are incredibly detailed, and we know that it's only for food served to children that's being reimbursed. I don't know how other families work. I have 6 kids, and my kids eat meals at school. And when my kids are eating meals at school, I'm not buying food for them to eat lunch at home. And so our food budget stretches a little bit differently, right? And so it addresses a broader element of food insecurity across families while being really accountable and knowing where the food is going.
We know that education is the only pathway out of poverty. So when you look at children in the classroom who bring hunger as one of the symptoms of poverty into the classroom, it's the biggest roadblock to their learning success. It is the biggest roadblock for them becoming financially independent, successful leaders of their families 10, 15 years down the road. If we know that hunger is a barrier, it makes absolutely no sense why we would not pull our resources together to eliminate that barrier so that they have the chance to be as educationally successful as they possibly could be.
Regardless of the declarations or concessions made by our elected representatives, childhood hunger still persists in North Carolina. The responsibility to drive change and find a solution rests with the residents of this state. As long as there are hungry children in North Carolina, it is crucial for everyone in the state to acknowledge this problem and to explore ways to contribute to its resolution.
Every single person has to believe it's their problem. Every single one of us has to realize our own capacity to either help or I would go so far as to say add to the problem by pretending it doesn't exist. For a lot of people though, it's just not knowing. And once you know, you can't unknow that there are people right around the corner, that there are kids sitting next to your kids in classes that don't go home to food. And once you know that, if every single person was moved to do something about it, it would change.
Child hunger is something that can be solved. It's a solvable problem, particularly in the United States, but it's really making a decision as a state that we care enough about our kids, we care enough about the health and well-being of all families. We want schools to be successful. We want kids to be successful in school. And so feeding them is the most important step we could do to assure that we have healthy, strong kids and communities and families, and we have a healthier, strong state to move forward into the years ahead.
You can help by contacting your elected officials and supporting a local food bank or other charity that is combating hunger in North Carolina. No donation to a food bank is too small, and no donation is too large.